deathbed, my mother told me that there was no afterlife, that when we die, we die. I felt it was such a shame that my own mother had nothing to hope for, just the emptiness of a misplaced scientific atheism. When you're dead, that's it, Marlene Dietrich. Nevertheless, this contrasts with so many of what the dying actually experience. A few weeks before death, sometimes as long as a month, but including just hours before, around 50% seem to see and speak with relatives, friends and relatives, whom have already died, as though the dying are being welcomed to the next world. Again, it seems like such a shame that my mother did not appear to experience this. Could it be because she was a covert narcissist? As is now suggested, someone without a soul? Again, terribly sad. But it is the soul's acceptance of death that I wish to explore. More recently, I had an episode with an elderly Dutch lady, whom I also identified as a covert narcissist. I had recently had a heart attack, but she seemed more concerned to berate me for not seeking medical assistance than actually concerned about my health. My reasons for not seeking medical help are deep and unrelated to this vlog, but the Dutch lady's reaction revealed so much. She explained that if I did not go to a doctor that I would die. I explained that I'd had a good life and that if my time had come I was happy to meet Allah. Do not fear death so much, but rather the inadequate life, Bertolt Brecht. She seemed to be affronted by this, and like my mother repeated that when we die there is nothing, that we never come back. Now this was in Bali, where almost all believe in reincarnation, and I explained that most of the world didn't see things as she did. Maybe this was the final straw for her, as all narcissists like to paint a picture that they are part of a majority and that their beliefs are the norm. Furthermore, I'd simply refuse to allow this narcissist to control me, not out of malice, but genuinely taking her comments at face value and not manipulation. Of course, despite having just had a heart attack, this lady was probably closer to death than I, and I had exposed her own fear of death. If we lose love and self-respect for each other, this is how we finally die. Maya Angelou. My heart attack, coupled with my long-term asthma, both had and has, resulted in me coughing, especially at night. Again, this lady told me to visit a doctor, despite me having been treated for asthma for my entire lifetime. She explained that she too had a cough, but was prescribed some medication, as though we all had the same ailments and indeed seek the same solutions as her. I did visit the pharmacy and picked up some partial relief. But after I left the hotel, she spread gossip about me, which resulted in me being banned from the hotel. I'm certain that nobody suspects her of any manipulation, as those she enlisted in her plan, they're known as flying monkeys, will have caused the problems for me. But I know how covert narcissists work, and I'm under no illusion who is behind what happened. Am I still bitter? Well, who wouldn't be? But such episodes are sent to provide a lesson to us. And I truly believe there are many lessons in this episode. I've spoken about dying without really explaining what I mean, despite us all believing that we know. I'm sure that you have all spoken to an elderly person who has explained to you that they still feel young. They may even talk about their illness and how their bodies are not able to do what they once did, but still claim to feel young. In part, this is the elderly crying out to be treated seriously and with respect, not as a machine which is beginning to be beyond repair. But could this perception of youth be the soul speaking? That our body ages, but if anything, the soul seems to get younger? This would mean that the soul really is detached from the human body and increasingly detaches as we age. I've noticed how the effects of black magic, or what are often called Djinn in Indonesia, seem to be like a virus, indeed could be a virus. It often begins with constipation for days. I eat a lot of fruit, and when I finally expel the blockage, it's extremely long, but not particularly hard. I used to find smoking help, but since my heart attack I haven't smoked at all. All too often I'm awoken sometime between 3 and 4, sneezing and coughing as though I'm getting cold. Also often I suffer from conjunctivitis type symptoms, which occasionally affects the ears. All too often I get up at around 4 o'clock, unable to get back to sleep. But again, this is a normal sign of ageing. As my torment has developed, my asthma has become more pronounced. Remember my coughing at the hotel? Indeed, it's become almost unmanageable at times and resulted in me being bedridden for some 2 months. Asthma is an autoimmune response, and there are others. My rheumatism has become somewhat unmanageable at times. It also results in nodules, which I manage to keep at bay with elasticated supports. But what I'm learning is whether this is a Djinn or a virus, I can control it with my thoughts. By thinking happy thoughts, planning for the future, I can make the symptoms go away, although never permanently. This has led me to consider if all illness really comes from the same source. Of course, I'm not talking about the effects of accidents here, be it a Djinn or just a thought form. Although most will find it easier to manage if I'm talking of something external like a Djinn. As we get older, we seem to suffer from more illness. But is it possible that this is a Djinn which particularly affects the elderly? Or maybe that as we age, we lower the barriers which normally protect us. So what does this tell us about death? Could there be a death Djinn? Or is it just the same as an illness Djinn and we simply give up on fighting it? It's almost as though we are beginning to give up on fighting illness and ultimately death. Or it seems to be the thrust on this vlog. The soul is detaching from the human body. Man always dies before he is fully born. Erich Fromm. You really don't need to agree with me about there being a Djinn bringing us illness and death to comprehend the rest of this vlog. Simply to be aware of how illness and ultimately death could be more about the soul detaching than an external factor. Indeed, these are only ideas that I've had as I become all too aware of my own ageing. Age, there's a number of changes which appear to be the soul preparing for death. Indeed, the soul seems to be getting stronger and preparing for its next journey. In fact, the soul seems to be detaching itself from the limitations of the human body, but it's also beginning to detach from what seemed important, such as popular music and fashion. Social status and its material trappings no longer motivate the elderly. Consciousness has expanded, and what once preoccupied us are but temporary illusions. The soul appears to be accessing memories or information which are far beyond the reality, and most of us are so attached to. All too often these are seen as impending madness, but they seem to tap into a consciousness and most of us are unaware of or have ignored. Death puts an end to all our attachments, however superficial or deep. Krishnamurti. Dreams become more vivid, and so often we are met with a sense of déjà vu. I actually believe that dreams are closer to the truth than our waking state. But let's save that rabbit hole for another day. Even when troubled with illness, the older soul seems to exhibit a sense of serenity, an understanding of greater purpose, beyond the trappings of our materialist existence. But this is associated with compassion for others, especially the young. An understanding of what troubles them is only fleeting. The impatience and search for meaning of the young are understood with a knowing nurturing. The elderly seem to become lighter and much easier to be with. Indeed, the elderly are no longer annoyed by the mistakes of the young, but recognise that it's all a part of their learning, offering guidance if asked for, but never forcing its will on others. The consciousness of the older soul brings with it a range of spiritual powers. Extrasensory perception is one example. The elderly seem to know when others in the family are in trouble, when there is trouble around the corner. They appear to develop a greater empathy and can read the mood of people and social gatherings. Intuition becomes so sharp that the elderly perceive the subtle signs of major events, especially disasters, without formal divination. Where does this additional consciousness come from? Could it be the past? As the elderly seem to be able to pick up on ancestral wisdom, and maybe even from ancestors they themselves have never met. The soul seems to see itself as a link between generations and seeks to pass on the patterns across generations that are so normally obscured. Like myself, other people begin to understand the healing properties of plants without having studied such things. But the elderly soul also seems to develop a connection with the paranormal. Again, this is often seen as impeding madness, but the elderly frequently communicate with souls of the dead or entities from other dimensions, even God. The life of the dead is placed in the memory of the living. Marcus Tullius Cicero. At times these communications can provide information for the living, often providing comfort to the family. Despite scientific skepticism, this information can contain alarmingly personal content that the elderly person themselves could not possibly know. Again, like many elderly, I began to develop healing abilities, using touch to calm down, even heal others, but also an ability to heal emotional and spiritual wounds. This is especially true within the family, and seems to be related to intergenerational karma, seeing beyond the personalities engulfed in the conflict and identifying the deep wounds within, healing traumas across generations. Maybe it's simply experience, but it seemed to tap into the experience of the ancestors and the wounds which pass along generations. This can go much further, and old souls can provide a healing for society, spreading love and light, harmonising situations as they experience them. Often this can be expressed by the elderly, seeking to mend relationships which long since broke, even to meet with those they haven't seen for so long. Remember how I disagreed with the Dutch lady? Elderly souls become accepting of death as if it's somewhat familiar to them, and that the elderly are in contact with the dead, especially in our dreams. It really isn't something which frightens them. The elderly soul seems to perceive the life trajectory of the young. Again, this is not divination, but an ability to read the blueprints that there are along the young person's life. The elderly seem to have understood the map by which we lead our lives. This perception can also occur with strangers, with the elderly providing unsolicited warnings and advice. Unsolicited and maybe unwelcome, but often the warning is incredibly accurate and precise. Indeed, often the older soul can understand when such advice needs to be given, although not always when it is best received. The elderly soul seems to perceive patterns in human development, predicting major events, even feeling the waves of transformation which will affect humanity, seeing tragedies like wars as unwelcome process of change, understanding human change and the evolution of consciousness, and maybe, like me, being concerned about technological developments like AI. Indeed, I must apologise that, like AI-created vlogs, this vlog contains no references, but mine does contain my real thoughts and feelings, not those that behavioural sciences have determined will appeal most to you. In my defence, unlike AI, my vlogs are honest, and I absolutely promise there are no large corporations nor governments directing the content of my channel. The elderly soul seems to know the answers regarding life, but when questioned, has no idea why they know them. For many, they have premonitions about when they will die and begin to prepare for their own deaths. Finally, the elderly soul develops complete serenity towards death, the death of the human body, as though the soul wants to return to its source and gives thanks to all those around it. The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time. Mark Twain. We may all experience these changes as we age, but only if we have a soul. Does this really point to the incredible sadness of the elderly narcissist, as I witnessed in my mother? Certainly, I appear to be experiencing so many of these signs of ageing. I had believed that many were in response to black magic that had been sent to me over the last 13 years, but also my own journey as a Sufi towards Marifa, as I embrace Allah. Marifa, unlike mere intellectual knowledge, ilm, involves a direct experiential encounter with the divine. It's a process of unveiling the true nature of reality and one's relationship with Allah. Marifa is not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about the transformation of the self. As one gains deeper Marifa, they experience changes in their character, moving towards greater piety, humility, and more profound connections with Allah. The journey of Marifa is often described as the path of spiritual growth, where individuals progress from the state of ignorance to a state of profound understanding and proximity to Allah. All of this is only possible by suppressing one's own ego. Ego death, as it's sometimes called. But most of those signs of aging are also indicative of the waning of the ego and ultimately ego death. Is it therefore possible that these signs are simply the ego becoming less important as we age? It certainly feels like a spiritual journey, but maybe one I only embarked on because of my aging and ego waning. Thus, is the death of the human body really just the ultimate sign of ego death? This would certainly have resonance with my views on there being a Djinn of death, or the soul giving up on the human body. Again, the fate of the elderly narcissist seems particularly sad.